Hello, this is Patrice, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the August 11th issue of the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Major quake hits Colombia, killing at least 111. Rescue crews and regular people searched for survivors, and the death toll was likely to rise. More than 1,500 homes were damaged, the president said. This is an article by Julia Turkowitz, Genevieve Glotsky, and Michael Levinson. A powerful earthquake rocked Western Colombia on Monday morning, rattling much of the country and setting off a desperate search for survivors in the rubble of collapsed buildings in several major cities. At least 111 people were killed and 87 others were injured, according to Colombia's president, Abelardo de la Espriella, who said that at least 1,575 homes, 18 health centers, and 52 schools had been damaged. The death toll was likely to rise as rescue crews and residents continue to dig through flattened buildings. A 7.4 magnitude earthquake, which struck at 7:34 a.m. local time, was the strongest recorded in Colombia in the last decade, according to the Colombian Geological Survey. The agency said that after two aftershocks with magnitudes of 2.8 and 4.8 had been recorded, and that the quake was felt in neighboring countries, including Panama, Ecuador, and Venezuela, which is still recovering from the devastating twin quakes just weeks ago that killed more than 6,000 people. The epicenter, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, was about 3 miles east of San Jose de Palmar, a town of about 5,000 people in the Choco region, one of the poorest parts of Colombia. Video showed partially collapsed buildings in Cali, Colombia's third largest city, with about 2 million residents, as well as in Pereira and Manizales, two cities that are hubs of Colombia's coffee growing region. In the town of Calima del El Darien, 3 children were killed when a wall collapsed, according to the region's governor, Dilian Francesca Toro. Ms. Toro said that one hospital had also collapsed, another had been overwhelmed with victims, and that patients had been evacuated from a third hospital. The city of Pereira, which is home to about 500,000 people and lies just 35 miles from the epicenter, was also hard hit. The mayor, Mauricio Salazar, told a national radio station that at least 18 people had been killed there. In Cali, Francesco Gonzalez, 34, said he was riding on his motorbike when he saw a motel called Molino Rojo crash to the ground in a cloud of dust. He immediately became part of a volunteer rescue effort involving 20 to 30 people clawing through the rubble to find survivors. As young women, she had fractured a young woman, she had fractured her legs and she was the first one we got out, he said. Her husband came out from under her. He was in worse shape. He had passed out. 4 survivors were pulled from the rubble, but Mr. Gonzalez was worried that others might still be buried underneath. By mid-morning, rescue workers were clambering over the rubble, calling down into holes. Is anyone there? At least 26 buildings in Cali had collapsed, according to its mayor, Alejandro Eder. He said that officials had dispatched rescue teams and were asking for donations of helmets, work gloves, water, and safety goggles. At the scene of one collapsed apartment building in Cali, residents used wooden poles in their bare hands to move slabs of broken concrete. Everyone went running to help, said Edgar Figueroa, 48, who said he lived in the building next door. The lady who sells ice cream, the lady who sells juices. He added, we think there are 3 people alive inside because we can't find them, including 2 children. In Cali, searches at several collapsed buildings were punctuated by calls for silence as rescue workers and civilians strained to hear the cries of survivors. The quake presented an immediate challenge for the president, Mr. de la Espriella, a right-wing lawyer with no previous political experience who took office on Friday. He had campaigned on a promise to shrink government and crack down on resurgent armed groups and rampant crime and earned the endorsement of President Trump, who had repeatedly clashed with Mr. de la Espriella's leftist predecessor, Gustavo Petro. Mr. de la Espriella said on social media on Monday that he had personally assumed leadership of the emergency response to the quake. You are not alone, he wrote. The state is present and taking action. He later briefed the public at a news conference and promised to provide updates every few hours. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on social media that the Trump administration stands ready to support the people of Colombia and the de la Espriella administration. In the capital, Bogota, about 150 miles from the epicenter, Mayor Carlos Fernando Galán said preliminary inspections had found no structural damage from the earthquake. He added that Bogota was preparing to send 100 rescuers and rubble removal equipment to harder hit cities. Now is a moment for solidarity, he said in a video on social media. Bogota is ready to help however it can. As voters grow anxious over AI, Trump shrugs off the concern. The president and his top aides have been especially bullish about data centers despite national blowback against the facilities. This is an article by Tony Rahm. The rapid rise of artificial intelligence has started to rattle voters around the country, raising fears that they could be thrust from their jobs if the technology succeeds or lose their retirement savings if the industry falters. But for all the emerging doubt and political blowback, there has been no sign of concern at the White House, where President Trump has generally maintained a much more sanguine view about the coming digital revolution. To the administration, AI can do little wrong. In recent weeks, Mr. Trump and his top aides have dismissed the suggestion that widespread automation could carry real negative consequences for families, businesses, and the broader U.S. economy. Even as the electorate grows uneasy about the technology and the data centers that power it, the president has only hardened in his view that AI will supercharge everything from medical research to military action. The political chasm between the president and the public has been most evident in surrounding the red hot issue of data centers, which Mr. Trump has defended as money machines, even as opposition widens nationally over the facilities. A small group of demonstrators interrupted one of Mr. Trump's rallies in Michigan last month to demand an end to data center construction. That incident came on the heels of similar protests around the country in a campaign organized by conservatives who otherwise support Mr. Trump's politics. I think they are bullish about this technology, said Michael Strain, the director of economic policy studies at the Conservative American Enterprise Institute, said of the administration's approach. Mr. Strain said he generally agreed with much of the president's general approach in seeking to foster AI, and that he believed that technology would benefit the economy and national security. But he acknowledged the White House seemed to be less interested in preparing for the possible downsides. It's a potential vulnerability for the economy, he said, and one worth tracking and seeing how it develops. Mr. Trump may yet prove correct in his glowing assessment about AI, but his support is contrasted starkly with the more measured views from economists and policymakers across the political spectrum. Even among those who see AI as the most significant technological leap in human history, there is a sense that a disruption of this magnitude rarely occurs without consequence, and that Washington needs to be more prepared for every scenario. There is one view that AI can make workers significantly more productive, and that the resulting gains could add significantly to global growth. Chasing that vision and the immense wealth that may accompany it, the largest technology companies, known as the hyperscalers, could spend as much as $5 trillion on AI infrastructure in the coming years, according to JP Morgan. That could require companies like OpenAI and Anthropic to generate significantly more revenue than they do now. That has delighted Mr. Trump, who has sought in his second term to increase construction and manufacturing. There's also great doubt among many experts that such an evolution is going to be frictionless. Again, I'm fast forwarding towards the end of the article since it's so long. In an attempt to tamp down voters' mounting concerns, Mr. Trump did broker an agreement earlier this year with technology companies that included those companies paying for needed electricity upgrade. But the pact, which is voluntary, came as the president appeared to doubt openly whether there was even an energy cost problem to begin with. They need some PR help, he said at a March event, referring to the public relations image of data centers, because people think that if a data center goes in there, electricity prices are going to go up, and that's not happening. It's not going to happen. Lawmakers in 15 states, nonetheless, have considered such bans targeting data centers over the past year, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures, which has updated its count in July. Last week, and Andy Beshear of Kentucky, a Democrat, also signed a new directive meant to protect the residents from electricity price hikes from data centers, while Governor Greg Abbott of Texas, a Republican, required new projects to submit an energy audit. Mr. Trump still appeared to criticize some of the moves. Singling out Texas, he told Punchbowl News in an interview published Friday that its actions were a mistake, adding of data centers, it could be bigger than oil. The full-throated endorsement of data centers has increasingly put the president on the opposite side of his fellow conservatives who have long been skeptical of the nation's largest technology companies. Among the most vocal is Humans First, an advocacy group led by Amy Creamer, a former Tea Party leader who helped organize the Stop the Steal rally on Facebook after the 2020 presidential election. Ms. Creamer said she used AI every day and was not wholly opposed to it. But she said policymakers at all levels of government had failed to chart the future of technology in a way that accounted for the public's anxieties. People are very, very upset, she said. They feel like there's a disconnect. They feel like there's no one speaking for them. Again, if you'd like to hear the article in its entirety, the number is 716-821-5555. Places where the bombs have rarely stopped falling in Iran. While fighting has abated in much of Iran, near constant U.S. airstrikes in Qishm Island and other southern spots have upended lives and livelihoods. This is an article by Farnaz Basihi and Shirin Hakim. The turquoise blue waters, white sandy beaches, and dramatic cliffs on the island of Qishm until recently drew millions of annual visitors and a devoted community of artists, investors, and designers who helped turn the island into Iran's hottest vacation spot. It is so exquisite that it earned a UNESCO Global Geopark designation because of its natural wonders, with names that seem out of a fairy tale: the Valley of Stars, the Hara Forest mangroves, and the hawksbill turtles of Shibdiraz. The war with the United States and Israel, now stretching into its 6 months, has upended life, leaving the once bustling destination desolate and its population struggling. Farida, 25, works in the tourism industry in Qishm and said in a telephone interview from the island that everyone in the tourism sector has been affected and that the war never abated for the people of the South, unlike elsewhere in Iran, because of the near constant airstrikes. She said they lived in a perpetual state of alert. Many people owned boats and transported passengers, ran guest houses, rented motorbikes to tourists, or operated cafes. Almost all the cafes gradually closed, sometimes one or two a day. Some people simply packed up and left the island, said Farida, who, like everyone interviewed for this article, spoke on condition that her last name not be used, her fear of retribution. Qishm was one of Iran's rare economic success stories, fueled by robust domestic investment that led to development and job growth. In 2025, nearly 4 million visitors traveled to Qishm, and investment in the island grew by 241% compared with the year before, according to government data. The tourism sector employed about 40% of Qishm's 150,000 people, and the island's free trade zone, allowing for imports and exports at minimal cost and free of tax, made Qishm a trade hub. But that has all changed, particularly as the U.S. bombing campaign has become largely focused on the south of Iran, targeting Iranian forces, installations involved in attacking vessels in the nearby Strait of Hormuz, and critical infrastructure used by civilians. The situation is simply devastating, said Hosan, a 29-year-old teacher from Qishm. The regional economy has practically come to a standstill. Again, this is a very long article. I've abbreviated it to hear the entire thing. It's 716-821-5555. And this is a reminder that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Flock cameras can track every car in America. Police love them. Citizens don't. In Texas, there's one thing liberals and conservatives agree on. They don't want cameras trained on their cars. This is an article by Fernando Alfonso III and Kashmir Hill. Driving down a road lined with strip malls outside Dallas, Philip, a 27-year-old cell phone tower repairman, was describing the exquisite piquancy of his homegrown hot peppers when he stopped mid-sentence. Flock, he said, pointing to a traffic light pole in an intersection. Attached to it was a small black box with a camera that takes photos as cars drive by. It was a license plate reader made by Flock Safety, based in Atlanta, that alerts law enforcement when it spots wanted cars and allows officers to see where cars of interest have been. Philip pulled into the strip mall, parked outside a dentist's office, and opened an app on his phone. The app, DFlock, invites people to view and contribute to an open map of public mass surveillance devices. He zoomed in on the intersection on the digital map and plotted the location of the camera. Philip asked that his full name be withheld because Flock's chief executive, Garrett Langley, once called DFlock terroristic. To Philip, DFlock is about pushing against the proliferation of cameras that capture the ordinary moments of ordinary people. And that is my way of pushing back. Oh, excuse me. And what is my way of pushing back? Education, data, Philip said. Am I just being paranoid? No, they're actually everywhere. Flock's 120,000 cameras can be found alongside roads in every state but Alaska, allowing law enforcement officers to see within seconds where a car might be and where it has been. The company has contracts with 7,000 law enforcement agencies, which is 40% of all departments in the United States. Other companies sell license plate tracking services, but Flock, a private company valued at $8.4 billion, has become a lightning rod because of its rapid expansion, the ubiquity of its cameras, and a number of controversies involving its product. A Texas officer used Flock's cameras to track a woman across state lines who was suspected of self-administering an abortion. Officers across the country have abused their access to Flock's cameras, including to track romantic partners, resulting in discipline and termination. Los Angeles and Dayton, Ohio, among other cities, recently suspended their contracts with Flock to prevent immigration authorities from accessing data from the cameras. Dayton resorted to covering the cameras with trash bags. In cities like Houston, Oakland, California, and Grand Junction, Colorado, residents have taken matters into their own hands with police reports and surveillance footage documenting Flock cameras being cut down, splattered with paint, and even shot. Flock's pitch is simple. It can help the police find stolen cars, locate wanted people, and solve crimes. One license plate reader led to the arrest in Florida of a man who had threatened a mass shooting in Louisiana. Another helped police find the man, eventually convicted in an assassination attempt against Donald J. Trump. But as its cameras have spread, so has the opposition. Americans are accustomed to surveillance cameras. They put them on their doorbells and tolerate them on street corners, offices, and restaurants. What sets Flock's cameras apart is that they are connected, creating a vast searchable national network, often surprising residents who didn't realize their local governments had signed up for them and raising fears of Big Brother style surveillance. And they are hard to miss once you start looking for them. We all want, expect, and deserve privacy. The problem is that we typically cannot feel, see, or experience the loss of it, the loss as it is happening, said Danielle Citron, a professor of law at the University of Virginia. Seeing those cameras is a punch in the gut. We see them and it says you have no room to just be, to go about your day feeling lost in the crowd. As Flock built one of the nation's largest vehicle tracking networks, Texas became a bellwether both for law enforcement's adoption of the technology and for the growing backlash. Flock started selling its services to police departments in early 2020, installing a few dozen cameras in a suburb of Houston. 6 years later, 700 departments in Texas contract with Flock. The opposition includes liberals worried about government surveillance, conservatives skeptical of expanding state power, and privacy conscious citizens and lawmakers concerned about how the network could be abused. It's going to be an ongoing debate, probably forever, Mr. Langley, Flock's chief executive, said in an interview. We should have this debate and we should continue to evolve our point of view as a society of what we're comfortable with and what level of safety we want. Again, I am abbreviating this article. 1 year later, Trump's takeover has changed DC. Is it better off? The deployment of National Guard troops and federal agents into the streets has been expensive. How effective it has been is debatable. This is an article by Campbell Robertson. A year ago, President Trump pronounced Washington violent and slum-ridden and announced he was going to take back our capital. Many residents watched in dismay as the president declared he was sending thousands of National Guard troops and federal law enforcement agents into the streets and that the Metropolitan Police Department was under direct federal control. Courts blocked some of the Trump administration's most aggressive actions, but the incursion, which local activists called the occupation, has been the most serious encroachment on Washington's limited self-government in half a century. Armed troops have become fixtures in metro stations, on downtown streets, and around newly refurbished federal parks. Federal agents in flak jackets patrol residential streets alongside city police officers. The administration loosened restrictions on car chases by federal police, though there have been several crashes, two of them fatal. And with arrests and prosecutions soaring, the jail population has grown by nearly 20% over the past year, and courts are at what the city's chief judges describe as a breaking point. None of this appears likely to go away soon. The National Guard deployment, now 4,636 troops from 23 states and territories, has been extended until President Trump's last day in office. A $292 million federal contract was recently awarded for building apartment-style lodging units for the troops. The president's announcement of the Guard's deployment came just days after Edward Korestein, a 19-year-old member of the Department of Government Efficiency, was assaulted in what authorities say was an attempted carjacking. Two teenagers later pleaded guilty and were sentenced to probation in connection with the attack. Citing the assault when he announced he was sending in troops, Mr. Trump declared that he was going to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor. Impact in certain neighborhoods in Washington was immediate. From the moment the sun went down, there was a caravan of police officers rolling through, said Mirwani Girima, 38, a filmmaker and community activist in Ward 7, a working class and majority Black area. Federal agents fanned out into neighborhood gatherings in apartment complexes, he said, confronting people about tinted car windows or open containers of alcohol. That essentially has been the pattern they've maintained for the whole year, he said. The White House insists that the steep drops in homicide, carjacking, and robbery are proof that the operation has been a success. President Trump has transformed our nation's capital from a crime-ridden city into a safe and beautiful haven, said Lauren Biss, a White House spokeswoman. However, the developments come as violent crime is in precipitous decline nationwide, falling to record lows in cities with no federal intervention. And in Washington, violent crime was already reaching the lowest levels in decades before Mr. Trump's August announcement. The mayor, Muriel Bowser, often reminds Washington's 700,000 residents of the city's particular vulnerability to the federal government's whims. As a federal enclave created by the Constitution, Washington has had the power to elect its own leaders only since 1973, when Congress passed the Home Rule Act, and even that authority is highly circumscribed. Given the Trump administration's leverage and the possibility that a Republican Congress could repeal home rule, the mayor has emphasized how a partnership could be beneficial. In a statement Monday, Ms. Bowers said that by working with federal forces, we preserved our autonomy, we saved lives by keeping our focus on public safety. But she said also that ultimately we demonstrated practicality and politically that there is no need for federal emergency action. Certainly, many residents want none of it. The takeover of the police that Mr. Trump announced was quickly challenged in court and ultimately limited to temporarily letting the administration direct the local police to assist immigration enforcement, and clearing homeless people's tents. Washington has always been heavily policed with thousands of officers and agents from the U.S. Park Police, the Capitol Police, and the Secret Service, in addition to the roughly 3,000 officers of the Metropolitan Police. But the federal law enforcement presence, once concentrated in the city center and around federal installations, has spread into residential neighborhoods. Daraja Carroll, a defense lawyer in Washington, said some of her clients are choosing to serve out short jail sentences rather than agree to be released on probation, given that there are just eyes and ears everywhere. I couldn't imagine being on supervised release and trying to feel free, she said. You don't know who's a special police officer, even at a grocery store. It is unclear what lies in store for the operation in Washington, which Mr. Trump insists has been nothing but a success. In June, the president said that if Janice Lewis George, a Democratic socialist who likened the federal presence to a military occupation, won the city's Democratic primary, he might push to get rid of home rule completely. Maybe we take back Washington and run it on a federal basis, he said. We won't put up with it. Days later, she won in a landslide. Extreme heat comes for the red chili capital of Pakistan. The traditional ways of cultivating the peppers may not survive the challenges of climate change and soaring costs, so Pakistani farmers are trying to adapt. This is an article by Elian Peltier and Zia ur Rehman. Pakistan is one of the world's top producers of red chili peppers, and the small town of Kunri is its red chili capital. Farmers dry their chilies the old-fashioned way in the sun, and on market days, the dust is so overwhelming that the fiery air makes eyes water and throats burn. But extreme weather, heat, floods, drought, and the unpredictability and high costs that come with these events is causing a way of life that has shaped generations of farmers to slowly disappear. On a recent morning in Kunri in southeastern Pakistan, Hassan Ali Dars wandered his once lush field of red chilies, now scarred by scorched crops, parched soil, and empty patches. He scanned the sky for signs that the monsoon season was nearing, which might relieve the struggling plants stressed by months of extreme heat, but there wasn't a drop of rain on the horizon, and within a few hours the temperature would top 120 degrees. Agriculture accounts for nearly a quarter of Pakistan's economy and employs half of its labor force. But the South Asian country of more than 250 million people is among the world's most vulnerable to climate change. Devastating floods in 2022 destroyed the nearly 4.5 million acres of agricultural land, roughly the size of New Jersey, in an episode that many farmers in the provinces of Sindh and neighboring Punjab, Pakistan's breadbasket, say they are still reeling from. Red chilies are among the worst affected crops, and Pakistani farmers say that growing the staple of Pakistani cuisine has become a constant challenge. In recent years, unpredictable weather has brought heat waves and floods in a dizzying cycle, shattering crops and hitting small scale traditional farmers especially hard as the rising costs make it difficult for them to adapt. Many farmers are trying to mix up their planting schedule to help the seedlings survive the heat until harvest. Mr. Dar started sowing his seeds in March instead of May so the plants would be established enough to withstand hotter summer temperatures. In some years, that has been enough. Last November, after a successful harvest, hundreds of chili growers, buyers, and brokers converged on the town to haggle around stacks of red pepper that easily topped 8 feet. These these market days breathe life into Kunri, an otherwise sleepy town of 2,500 people in the Sindh province and about 70 miles west of the Indian border. The most affluent buyers and the market slalomed between the on motorcycles while day laborers trudged, their backs hunched over the weight of the chilies. On average, more than 200 metric tons of them were sold daily at that single market during the post harvest season. The region accounts for more than 85% of Pakistan's red chili production. But this year, even March was too hot to plant, so Mr. Dars delayed sowing until May, shortening the growing season and exposing fragile young plants to increased heat stress. In a sort of race against time and climate change, Mr. Dars and other growers are now doping their soil with much more fertilizer than before in a desperate attempt to keep their plants alive ahead of the harvest season, which starts in September. By the end of July, the monsoon finally brought the first raindrops to Mr. Darr's field, but with it most likely come the risk of overwhelming rain, he noted. If there's too much rain, it will destroy the crop, Mr. Darr said. If there's no rain, that will also be destructive. The risk of flooding also makes the traditional process of drying the chilies more risky. After the harvest in September, farmers dry them on the ground, a process that takes about 10 days. Excess moisture can leave the harvest vulnerable to fungi. For years, small farmers in Coonry, have clamored for more modern facilities that would allow them to dry their chilies in a more controlled environment. Whenever the government said it would open a center, nothing happened, said Mohammed Salim, a chili broker at the Coonry market. Local officials acknowledge that they're overwhelmed. Mohammed Khan, a district official in Coonry, estimated that up to one-third of the crop goes wasted during the drying and processing stages. Drying is the main issue for small landowners because of the mist that comes at night, he said. Larger landowners have managed sorry, larger landowners have managed to better shoulder the added costs that have come with the changing weather, Mr. Khan said. He said the CNE government was taking steps to address some of those challenges, including the recent approval of a new chili market in Coonry with facilities like warehouses and auction grounds aimed at better protecting the harvest. But faced with declining yields, higher fertilizer costs, and persistent irrigation challenges, many farmers have begun to diversify. This year, Mr. Dars decided to dedicate 4 acres of his field to 800 papaya plants. Still, he said that no matter the crop, few may be able to hold up to extreme weather. It seems that nature is no longer on our side, Mr. Dars said. As a reminder, you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The Rosetta Stone of San Francisco's counterculture revolution comes home. Ken Kesey's psychedelic bus, immortalized in the electric Kool-Aid acid test, is preparing for one more run, and to its owners, America sure could use it. This is an article by Heather Knight. Among the rolling hills outside Eugene, Oregon, down a winding gravel path and inside a big barn sits a school bus built in 1939. Its once blazing colors have faded, the roof is crumbling, its windows are cracked. The only regular occupants these days are insects. It might look like a hunk of junk, but the muted Technicolor splotches tell the story of one of the most exuberant periods of San Francisco history. 60 years ago, the bus symbolized the city's counterculture revolution, the embrace of psychedelic drugs, and the live out loud, love your neighbor ethos for which the era is remembered. With the nation once again facing war, polarized politics, and cultural battles, Zane Kesey thinks some of that old bus magic is needed. And that is why he's agreed to send the bus, the one he helped to cover in swirls of day-glow paint when he was 3, back to the city that spawned a movement. I would love to see it adored again, he said, and for people to feel that pure, innocent love that came out of it. His father, Ken Kesey, who died in 2001, had just written the novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest when he purchased the former school bus that a large Bay Area family had tricked out with beds, benches, and a refrigerator for road trips. Mr. Kesey and his free-thinking friends, called the Merry Pranksters, painted the bus in psychedelic colors, cut the sunroof into it, added a powerful sound system, and installed a balcony on top. A sign on the back read, "Caution, weird load." Above the windshield, where a bus typically displays its destination, somebody painted the misspelled word further, and the name for the bus struck. And so, if you're curious, they spelled it Furthur, which is not correct. I think it's ER. Anyways, the pranksters set out on a cross-country trip, smoking weed, tripping on LSD, and spreading the gospel of opening your mind, man. The journey was documented in Tom Wolfe's book of 1968, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, hailed by the New York Times back then as not only the best book on the hippies, but also essential. The bus and its beatnik driver, Neil Cassidy, appeared in the Grateful Dead song The Other One, which references Cowboy Neil at the wheel of the bus to Never Ever Land. The bus became part of the landscape of San Francisco's counterculture movement. In 1967, Mr. Kesey drove it into the Golden Gate Park for the Human Be-In, a gathering to protest a California law banning LSD. The event was a precursor to the city's Summer of Love later that year, during which tens of thousands of young, idealistic people poured into the city's Haight-Ashbury neighborhood and the park to protest the Vietnam War and promote hallucinogenic drugs and free love. Those days are long gone, and San Francisco is now known more for AI than LSD, more for billionaires than beatniks. But aims to bring back some of that old. Zane Kesey aims to bring some of that old flavor back with his dad's bus. Again, that article is abbreviated to hear it in its entirety. 716-821-5555. AIPAC, one of the biggest spenders on U.S. elections, faces its biggest test. The lobbying group has more than doubled its spending on political campaigns, while rarely mentioning Israel. It has placed a large financial bet on today's Michigan Senate primary. This is an article by Jennifer Medina, Matt Zdun, and Martin Gonzalez Gomez. In less than 5 years, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee has become one of the biggest spenders in American elections, flooding the airwaves in congressional races across the country. Since its first involvement in elections, the amount of money AIPAC affiliated political action committees have spent on the campaign advertising and outreach to voters has more than doubled from 29.3 million to 67.2 million, with much of it spent in Democratic primaries. The group's biggest test yet will come in Tuesday's Democratic Senate primary election in Michigan. AIPAC, and just to be clear, so AIPAC is AIPAC, and that stands for the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, just to be clear. AIPAC has spent more than $30 million in ads and outreach promoting Representative Haley Stevens over her opponent, Dr. Abdul El Sayed, according to the Federal Election Commission. Dr. El Sayed, who has run sharply anti-Israel campaign, has made the group's involvement a key part of the criticism of Ms. Stevens' candidacy. And I'm sorry, I'm just realized that actually this vote has already taken place, and it was won by Dr. Abdul El Sayed. So sorry, I saw this in today's paper, but it seems a little outdated. So I'm going to move on to another article. Two cities with a tangled history, Ceuta, Spain, and wow, Fnidq. It's Fnideq. So I'm going to call it Fnidq because I'm not sure. That's in Morocco, are physically separated by only a mile, but they are intertwined by family and trade. A recent border crisis is the latest chapter in their story. This is an article by Ben Hubbard, Carlos Barragan, and Aida Alami. The two North African towns are only a mile apart, but vast differences separate them. Ceuta sits near the northernmost tip of Morocco and juts into the Mediterranean Sea like it's an elephant's trunk. It is the territory of Spain where people enjoy the benefits of membership in the European Union. Compared with Fnidq, which is just south along the coast, it is wealthy. Fnidq is in Morocco, where economic prospects for many young people are bleak. In recent days, the divide between these communities collapsed as tens of thousands of migrants from Morocco and sub-Saharan Africa pushed from around Fnidq into Ceuta. The upheaval captured global attention, including that of President Trump. It was just the latest chapter in the tangled history between the two cities whose people have been mixing and trading for generations, even as their government's policies and disputes have hardened the border between them. The latest crisis illustrated in condensed form the perennial reality that has bedeviled governments across the globe that try to control illegal migration. The economic disparity will motivate strivers across borders, often at great risk to themselves, to seek better lives. In more than a dozen recent interviews in Fenijik, and Cuta, no one said they expected migrants to stop attempting the trip. If they opened the border, half of Morocco would leave, said Abdullah Yusufi, 61, who was selling boogie boards, foam noodles, and inflatable inner tubes near the beach in Fenidik. Cuta was clearly visible just across the bay. Asked if he had sold gear to migrants trying to make the crossing, he shrugged. I don't ask people what they're going to use them for, he said. The Moroccan government considers Ceuta occupied Moroccan territory and has at times restricted the border to put pressure on Spain. Ceuta has been under Spanish control for hundreds of years, and its 84,000 residents are Spanish citizens, many of them from the mainland. Many others have roots in Morocco, stay in touch with relatives there, speak Moroccan, Arabic, and are Muslim. For many years, Moroccans who lived nearby could enter Ceuta without a visa. Some would attend summer carnivals there. Many others came to bring back duty free goods to resell, a type of permitted contraband that was good for business in Ceuta and key to the economy of Fenidik and the surrounding area. The amount of money that was coming into this part of the country was astounding, said George Bahalia, who teaches anthropology at Wesleyan University and has studied the border. But after Morocco built a giant port complex nearby, it restricted the illicit trade from Ceuta, he said. During the pandemic, Morocco closed the border with Ceuta, and it did not allow the trade to resume when the border reopened, hurting the economies on both sides. That exasperated the wealth gap that has propelled people from Fenidik and other Moroccan towns towards Ceuta. For decades, people built an economy around that trade, and now it was gone, said Mr. Bahalia. All these people, the thousands and thousands who made a living out of that border, haven't had their jobs replaced. To enter Ceuta now, Moroccans need visas, which many cannot obtain. At the border crossing, Spanish and Moroccan officials monitor traffic and stamp passes. And now for a break, we'll go into some sports. Don Nelson, Hall of Fame NBA coach and Celtics star, dies at 86. One of the winningest coaches in league history, he led the Bucks, the Warriors, and the Mavericks. He also had a brief stint with the Knicks. This is an article by Glenn Rifkin. Don Nelson, who won 5 NBA championships rings as a player with the Boston Celtics and went on to become an innovative and free-thinking Hall of Fame head coach and one of the winningest in league history, died on Sunday in Frisco, Texas. He was 86. His death at an assisted living facility was confirmed by his granddaughter, Christy Nelson Armstrong, who said that his health had deteriorated over a stroke about 3 weeks ago, after a stroke. Nelson, whose NBA playing and coaching careers spanned nearly 50 years, was an unlikely success story both on the hardwood and on the sideline. Nelly, as he was called, was an undersized small forward and not particularly fast or athletic. He was twice waived by the NBA teams before joining the Celtics in 1965. But he became an integral part of a Boston dynasty. He had in his arsenal a deadly jump shot and a knack for coming off the bench to spark his team. He was most famous as a player for a game-winning basket in 1969 NBA Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers. After retiring as a player in 1976, Nelson had barely tossed sneakers into the closet when the Milwaukee Bucks coach Larry Costello recruited him to be an assistant, though Nelson had never coached at any level before. But when the 1977 season got off to a 3-15 start, Costello was fired and the Bucks owner, Jim Fitzgerald, offered Nelson the top spot. I said, Jim, I'm not ready to be a head coach, Nelson recalled at his induction into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in 2012. And Fitz said to me, give it a try. If it doesn't work out at the end of the year, we'll talk about it. 11 years later, I was still there. Nelson spent 31 years as head coach, leading the Bucks, the Golden State Warriors, and the Dallas Mavericks to the upper echelons of the NBA with a total of 1,335 wins. He was named NBA Coach of the Year 3 times, though his teams never won a championship. During his coaching career, Nelson began buying up real estate on Maui in Hawaii, and he and his wife retired to the small community of Paia, where he smoked cigars, played poker with island neighbors like Willie Nelson, Woody Harrelson, and Owen Wilson, and grew marijuana that he used for medicinal purposes. Again, you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Typhoon Dolphin barrels into China, prompting mass evacuations. The storm, which made landfall on Sunday evening, is the strongest to hit China this year and has also caused flooding in parts of the Philippines. This is an article by Max Kim. A powerful tropical cyclone buffeted China on Sunday evening, prompting the authorities to evacuate more than 1 million people on the country's eastern coast and cancel hundreds of flights as the storm continued its long path of destruction across the Pacific Ocean. After forming near the Marshall Islands last month and traveling what meteorologists said was an unusually long distance, Dolphin, that's the name, it's confusing, but that's the name of the storm, pummeled Okinawa, Japan, injuring 6 people and cutting power to thousands over the weekend. It made landfall on Sunday evening near Yahun, a city in Zhejiang province on China's southeastern coast. The storm had winds as strong as 94 miles per hour or 151 kilometers per hour. More than 1,000 flights in Shanghai were canceled as the authorities warned that the eastern coast would continue to experience heavy rains this week. As residents wrangled umbrellas that were being flipped inside out by the powerful winds, the Shanghai Tower, the third tallest building in the world, was stabilized by a mass damper, an ornate pendulum-like weight suspended on one of its upper floors, according to the Chinese state broadcaster CCTV. The storm also intensified monsoon rains in the Philippines, disrupting maritime transportation and causing some areas to flood. In some parts of Manila, residents waded through waist-deep waters where some children also played, while others sheltered in emergency evacuation centers. The Philippine Meteorological Agency warned in a Monday advisory that certain regions could still get up to 200 millimeters or about 8 inches of rain that day. Numerous flooding events are likely, especially in areas that are urbanized, low-lying, or near rivers, the agency said. Landslide likely in moderate to highly susceptible areas. Dolphin, which takes its name from the Chinese white dolphins that live in Hong Kong's water, is one of 3 tropical storms currently active in the Northwest Pacific. Joining it are Chan Hom, a type of sandalwood tree in Laos, and Pia Lu, a migratory bird in Macau. All 3 monikers were picked by an international typhoon committee that allows its 14 member countries to take turns naming storms. Iran insists Strait will stay closed until U.S. agrees to demands. A spokesman for the Iranian Foreign Ministry said that talks with Oman on shipping routes in the Strait of Hormuz were separate from discussions to fully reopen the waterway. This is an article by Aurelian Breeding. Iran said on Monday that any deal with Oman on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz would not lead to the waterway being fully reopened, and that the route would remain closed until the United States agreed to demands, including lifting a naval blockade. The comments were the latest sign that Iran sees its grip on the strait, which has driven up global energy prices, creating a political headache for President Trump as its best form of leverage in negotiations with Washington. Esmail Baghai, spokesman for the Iranian Foreign Ministry, said at a news conference on Monday that the focus of the talks with Oman was on reaching an understanding over a route for the safe passage of shipping, Iranian state media reported. The Oman talks were proceeding smoothly, Mr. Baghai added, according to the reports, but this issue is separate from the discussion of reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which was contingent upon the removal of the conditions that have been imposed on the Islamic Republic of Iran by the United States. Mr. Baghai's comments echoed remarks by Abbas Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister, who said on Saturday that Iran and Oman were very close to an agreement, but that reopening it was contingent on other conditions. The United States and Iran are not negotiating directly, although Secretary of State Marco Rubio said last week that the talks between Iran and Oman were being conducted with American input. The Strait of Hormuz, which runs between Iran and Oman, is a key route for the oil and gas trade. Tehran effectively closed the waterway after the United States and Israel launched their military campaign against Iran in late February, and it has become a key sticking point as Iran and the United States alternate between periods of negotiation and bursts of fighting. The closure of the waterway has increased energy costs in the United States, where polls show that support for the already unpopular conflict is falling. Hardliners in Iran believe that the country's ability to close it to traffic has put it in a position of strength and that it should not make diplomatic concessions. Last week, a top Iranian national security official issued a set of demands that are part of Iran's longstanding public negotiating stance, and that he said that the United States must meet before Tehran would fully reopen the waterway. And those included the lifting of the U.S. naval blockade and sanctions on Iran, the withdrawal of American forces from around the country, the payment of war reparations, the release of frozen Iranian assets, and the end of attacks on Israel's allies in the region. Most of those demands were detailed in a ceasefire agreement known as the Islamabad Memorandum that the United States and Iran signed in June, though that document said sanctions would be fully lifted only in the event of a final deal regarding Iran's nuclear program. The June agreement quickly fell apart and most of its terms were violated within weeks. Mr. Trump has declared the deal over. On Sunday, he told Axios that economic distress and high inflation in Iran would eventually force Tehran to agree to a new deal. He did not threaten further military action against Iran, saying, "We are low keying it." The Iranian authorities, however, believe that they can withstand a greater economic pain than Mr. Trump, who has midterm elections in November to consider. At the news conference on Monday, Mr. Begay said it was up to the American side to stop and compensate for its illegal and destructive actions in order to talk about the next steps. Here's a man bites dog story, a newspaper that's doing well. In a world of failing newspapers, free weeklies like the Chronicle of Glens Falls, New York, are still finding readers. All it takes is owners who do absolutely everything. This article is by Eric Wemple. Those who say print is dead should make the delivery rounds on Thursday mornings with Mark Frost, founder of the Chronicle of Glens Falls, New York. As Mr. Frost drives around in a Subaru Forester packed with bundled newspapers, the faithful stand waiting at drop-off points. One of those spots is a Hannaford grocery store where William Norton, 74, waits in his maroon Chevy Silverado, ready to grab 40 copies of the Free Weekly for his neighbors in Stony Creek, a twisty and tenebrous ride from Glens Falls. "That's all they got to read over there," said Mr. Norton by way of explanation. People running off with stacks of chronicles is common enough that Mr. Frost has taken to quizzing them on their intentions. Printing is expensive after all, and he wants each copy to reach a reader. "Had a guy actually tell me the other day, 'I'm packing some glass,'" Mr. Frost recalled. He took the papers back. Mr. Frost's travails are common to a plucky category of publications sprinkled across the country. Though nearly 3,500 newspapers have ceased publication since the mid 2000s, about 2,250 publications like the Chronicle, independent, sometimes family owned weeklies, have been relatively resilient, said Zach Metzger, director of the State and Local News Project at Northwestern University. Large newspaper chains, the ones prone to consolidation, can't be bothered with them. Shoe leather is a key factor in that resilience. Mr. Frost has spent decades cultivating readers face to face, often while replenishing newspaper racks. He thanks everyone he sees taking a copy of the Chronicle. "Just think of the impact of that," Mr. Frost said. I would say the majority of outreach I get from engaged citizens are from people who say they are reading the Chronicle, said Diana Palmer, the mayor of Glens Falls. Advertisers report a similar dynamic. All that earned influence hangs in peril. The Chronicle has repeatedly grazed the line between a going concern and going under. The pandemic just about sunk the whole enterprise, forcing a round of layoffs that, along with a resignation, reduced the staff to 4 from 12. As the newspaper's advertisers bounced back, so has the Chronicle, which now has a staff of 7 employees. A high school graduation issue in June at 44 pages was the beefiest in 6 years. Somehow, Mr. Frost said, we've managed to slip through time. If there is one thing that Mark Frost Chronicles will not countenance, it is an affront to the civic pride of Glens Falls, a city of roughly 15,000 that earned the moniker Hometown USA from Look magazine in the 1940s. When the 2013 film 12 Years a Slave premiered to critical acclaim, Mr. Frost bashed it for failing to highlight the role of Glens Falls played in the life of Solomon Northup, a free black man who was kidnapped and sold into bondage before returning to freedom and writing an 1853 memoir. Saratoga Spring gets all the huzzas when all that city did was introduce Solomon to his eventual kidnappers, Mr. Frost wrote. The studied provincialism has an origin story. Mr. Frost was born at Glens Falls Hospital, went to Glens Falls schools, and started writing for the now defunct Glens Falls Times in junior high school in the mid 1960s at a rate of 12 cents per column inch. Through the years, Mr. Frost has turned down overtures to replicate the Chronicle in other communities. My commitment is here, he said, noting that his ambition is to keep building one great newspaper. Mr. Frost has done every job at the paper except for bookkeeping and IT. But Mr. Frost is 75 years old, meaning that his ambition will soon be someone else's responsibility. It's here that newspapers in the Chronicle's niche quite often stumble, Mr. Metzger of Northwestern University said. No one is really stepping up to take over or buy the papers, he said. The Chronicle may just be an exception. Xander Frost, the 34-year-old son of Mark Frost and Ms. Hutchinson, saw his career at a Los Angeles comedy group hit pause during the COVID shutdowns. So he returned to his hometown where he witnessed his nearly 70-year-old father driving solo on an exhausting delivery route. He volunteered to ride shotgun on Thursdays. From there, he threw himself into whatever needed to be done at the newspaper, which turned out to be a lot. He sold ads, starting with $49 promos for the Chronicle's high school graduation issue. He overhauled the Chronicle's technology for processing ads and keeping the books. He wrote and edited stories, and he worked with his mother, Ms. Hutchinson, whom he credits with doing the painstaking, detail-heavy work, human resources, legal hiring that keeps the paper running. His parents tiptoe around the topic of the Chronicle's future, mindful not to pressure their son. When you're in a multi-generational family business, it's like super deep, Xander Frost said. Still, the expectation at the Chronicles that he will someday take over the succession he planned he said, is made. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the August 11th issue of the front section of the New York Times. We read from the front section of the New York Times every Sunday at 1 p.m. Your reader has been Patrice. It has been my pleasure to read to you, and I wish you a wonderful day.